And it's way better to have several $1,000s in the bank than to have a few Big Macs in your stomach, in my opinion at least. Sometime in December of 2014, I ended up getting my first job working at a movie theater at the ripe age of 16 years old. During this time, I became very acquainted with the idea of how money and time are very directly correlated with each other. See, I was very interested in buying gaming consoles. I was a huge gamer back whenever I was a teenager. And I looked at something like the Xbox 360 that at the time cost somewhere in the realm of $500-ish. And I looked at my paycheck, making $7.25 federal minimum wage, by the way, an hour, and I realized how expensive life was. See, there were things that I wanted to buy that I just wasn't within my realm of being able to get, at least reasonably. It would take like 2 paychecks or 3 paychecks, which is like a month to a month and a half, because you're paid bi-weekly, to be able to afford some of the bigger things. When I was looking at like going out and eating food, I realized that having a meal can cost like 1 or 2 hours of work, which is just crazy to think about. All that being said, I hadn't been educated on personal finance before taking my first job on. Now, obviously, later on, I started taking personal finance classes, started reading more books, and started becoming more familiar with concepts related to like investing and saving and how you basically balance out your pay. But at the time, I didn't have that. And it lets me making a pretty big mistake pretty early on, where I went to a video game kind of resale store where they buy games and then resell them for like cheaper prices or whatever. And I ended up spending $400 something on 2 deals. It was like a PS2 and original Xbox. Both had 50 games. And it was just a huge waste of money. I never played any of the games. I did it for nostalgia, and I thought that I could resell all of it, and I just didn't even do it until a year or 2 later. And I ended up making like $20 back, basically. I didn't make any money. I lost like almost $400. One of my biggest financial mistakes I've made, honestly. And I remember just blowing paychecks and just being irresponsible with my money because I just didn't know any better. I was also paying for things like, at the time, my car insurance was over 3 times more than it is now, and paying a lot for gas and just other like random stuff. And I would say that if I could go back and let younger Chris know anything, is that like, hey, a lot of things you're buying right now, like consumables, like eating food and stuff like that, you just don't need to do that. You know, like take the free food at home, skip out on buying the dumb games that you're only going to play like once and never touch again. Stop buying the random gear and equipment that you only end up using like a handful of times. Just save the money. Because obviously, as you get older, you have more responsibilities, you have more things you need to pay for, and having that money earlier on is a lot better. I'll eventually get into the subject of investing in later videos and talking about like how you can use your money to grow wealth going on into your life. But really, this video is more talking about like what should you do when you get your first job. And frankly, you should save as much money as possible. Whenever you're at a point early in life when you're just now making money, you haven't grown accustomed to spending it. You're used to having a small amount from Christmases and birthdays, and maybe if you have an allowance, and you're not used to really being able to buy big things. And it's okay to do that every now and then, but if you can not get used to spending all that money and instead get used to saving it, you'll thank yourself later on whenever you have to pay for things like college or buying a car or whatever other big expenses you'll end up having that actually have meaning and value. And it's really hard to tell 16-year-olds that, because once they get that paycheck, they go out and buy vape pens and they go out and eat with their friends, and that's all well and good until you realize that you're building really bad habits that are really hard to break, because it's something called lifestyle inflation. Or basically, once you are accustomed to a certain way of life, it's really hard to go down a peg or two. There was a point in my life where I wasn't eating out every other day, and where I wasn't spending a crap ton of money on candy and other foods. But now that I've grown accustomed to that, it's really hard to not do it. It becomes a habit, second nature. It becomes thoughtless, and all of a sudden you're spending $20, $30 a day. And whenever you're making $7.25 an hour, that's like 3 hours of your work per day. If you're working 8 hours a day, 5 days a week, a lot of your pay is just going to the random thoughtless expenses that you're doing and not going towards savings. And it's way better to have several $1,000s in the bank than to have a few Big Macs in your stomach, in my opinion, at least. So, yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed the video. This is the first of many personal finance videos that'll be coming out in the future. If you enjoyed, go ahead and give it a like. If you want to see more, subscribe, and do not forget to keep it casual.